Sometimes people contact me to talk about creative writing and how best they can work the craft to be successful. Other people I encourage to write when they feel as if they need to express themselves, when they're going through a hard time or when they're depressed and they feel a little low. There are many different ways of writing, of employing the craft. But I think it's good to talk about in terms of it being a very good form of expression. If you wish to write for publication, then of course you have to work a bit harder at it, because there are many rules that you have to honour. It's hard work. When you're working with editors, it can be hard work, all depending on how much you want to stick to what you've written or how much you're willing to see another person's point of view. That's something we all have to think about when we're practicing the craft. But it's really useful as a means of getting your thoughts down, as a means of expressing how you feel. And if you, like me, enjoy writing fiction, then it's quite nice to be able to look at a situation objectively and feed all your feelings and thoughts and experience about a situation into the piece of writing. I think there's nothing better than that. And when we say fiction, of course, I'm often famous for saying that fiction contains more truth, and indeed it does. My books in the series The Long Reflection contain far more truth about the Romany culture, probably, than the non-fiction books do. And that's because I am able to, as it were, slip behind the scenes and talk about a situation from the point of view of not only observing it, but of being able to see it, say it, and feel it as it naturally is. You sort of need to go through a little bit of a filtering process when you're writing non-fiction, but writing fiction, it's rather like a dream. It enables you to put something in a very neat and concise and constructive and realistic way. So when you're writing non-fiction, it's not that it's the opposite, that you can't say what is. It's a matter of structuring something so that you can, as I say, slip behind the scenes and give a bit more of a realistic, dreamlike quality to an experience of how someone feels. So a character in fiction will be able to talk about how something feels far more than if you're writing non-fiction, because it has to be, filtered through a certain mesh of do's and don'ts, I suppose, in some ways. I don't know. It's quite an interesting and complex craft, writing. I was only thinking earlier that a true writer spends a lot of time thinking about writing. You can walk about through your day thinking about a character or thinking about a situation that you wish to write about, and all the time you're forming that in your mind. And experiences you have, influences around you, what people say, what they do, things you come into contact with, will often influence what you wish to write about. So putting it down on the page is sometimes a very quick thing to do, in a sense. It's very swift, because you've already imagined and got to grips with part of the story that you need to write down in the end. Somebody I was thinking of in relation to this is Thomas Hardy, who said that most of the time when he's standing staring out of his window, he's actually writing a novel. He's getting the words into order, he's getting the story into order, he's getting all sorts of things worked out in his mind, and that involves just standing and staring, sometimes for a long period of time. Another thing I think is very important with regard to this is there are a lot of people who give advice on writing and who will talk about writing so many words a day if you want to complete a piece of writing and be more structured about it. I don't hold with this at all. I think if you're talking about so many words a day, then it's almost like going out for a jog or a run or a walk and recording how many steps you take, which is all right, all well and good if you're trying to be healthy. But this doesn't work if you talk about the creative art of writing. You really must put the story, the imagination, the dream world, if you like, you must put the actual fabric of the writing first before you start counting and clocking up words. Writing 500 words a day, or whatever some people can recommend, can just end up you just writing gobbledygook, and that's not what it's about. That's not at all what it's about. Writing is a craft that stretches you, that takes you to other dimensions. And if you use the words in a really good way, then you can use them to define something that you maybe can't always define when you're just in conversation. I love the idea of getting behind a character's eyes and speaking on their behalf. Now, this might not mean that I agree with what that character means or what they feel or see or think about, their ideas and aspirations and everything else. It just means that I can step back, I can be the observer, and you can take any number of characters and you may not always actually identify with them, but you are able to look behind their eyes, you are able to see their story. I think that's an important thing to be able to do when you're writing, because if you can do that, then you should, strictly speaking, be able to get behind your own eyes. And rather than see something in a more shallow light, so that you're just looking at something for face value, you can step behind yourself and understand and perceive your own makeup in a more realistic way. And that means you're not putting any false ideas onto what you wish to convey. Writing has many times saved me, especially fiction. I adore writing fiction. I'm still doing that at the moment. When We Borrow the Earth was published, I was writing fiction, and I didn't submit We Borrow the Earth to a publisher or an agent for consideration. The agent found me. There was an agent who heard my story when I met her, and she said, "You've got to write about this." So I withdrew back to my home and thought, do I want to do that? I was slightly disappointed, I must be honest, because I wanted to write fiction and I wanted to have my fiction published. But nevertheless, I was able to put We Borrow the Earth out there, and it's still a hit now. I hear from people all over the world. People from all over the world are still purchasing We Borrow, and it's a lovely thought to put the Romany culture out there. So yeah, writing if you think about writing, if you enjoy writing and you want any advice on writing, the best thing you can do is try to write every day, try to write something, try to observe. And just as Thomas Hardy was staring out the window, observation is a really, really good thing to remember when you want to write. If you can't observe life in its many different forms, from everyday life to life that's far more complex and interesting and in-depth, if you can't observe those things, then you're never going to be able to write successfully, I believe. So start observing, start looking in, round, through and beyond everything, start looking behind the eyes of people, start looking behind situations and see how you feel about that, and then write those thoughts down. Try to extract yourself as you are from the situation when you're trying to write about something. And if you do involve yourself, then you've got to be able to see yourself objectively along with everything else. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do, but it does take work. You can't just breeze into thinking, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to be a novelist, I'm going to be this great person who's remembered for writing. You can't just do that. And don't think you're doing something for humanity, which I know some people have said to me, and I think that's rather arrogant, I must be honest. You have to have humility when you're writing. You have to think that if you can demonstrate something or show something in its true light with an objective point of view, and that's the best you can do, it's the best you can achieve. All the great writers did that. They all did that. They all stepped back from themselves and they all looked behind the scenes. So, good. Wanted to talk about this because it's something that's close to my heart. Have a think about it. Great. Thanks for listening.